when the pyramid finally spoke, it didn't use words. It used particles from space. In 2017, a team of scientists stood in the shadow of the Great Pyramid, pointing streams of cosmic ray muons straight through its ancient stone. They expected to confirm the familiar blueprint from our school books: a descending passage, a queen's chamber, the steep grand gallery, and the king's chamber near the center. Solid rock everywhere else. No surprises, but that is not what happened. On their detectors, a ghost began to appear, a pale, glowing absence, a region where far more muons were passing through than the models allowed. Slowly, scan after scan, a vast hidden void bloomed into view, directly above the Grand Gallery, in the very heart of the monument, where there was supposed to be nothing at all. Did you know the Great Pyramid had just told us, in the language of the cosmos, that our map of it was wrong? For thousands of years, most of us have carried the same picture in our minds: the pyramid as a massive stone tomb, a few narrow corridors and chambers carved into a mountain of limestone, built only to guard a royal body on its last journey into the afterlife. But old legends tell a different story. They speak of secret schools, hidden passageways, and initiation chambers, where pharaohs and priests trained to walk among the gods. Now, the muon scans have handed us something that feels uncomfortably close to those legends. An enormous, unexplained space, at least as long as the Grand Gallery itself, sealed off, unreachable, floating like a hidden hall above the known passages. If the builders concealed a chamber this large in the very core of the pyramid, what else did they hide? How many more gates and galleries are still locked behind stone? And most importantly, why go to such extremes to erase this space from both grave robbers and from history itself? Welcome back to the channel. Here, we explore the mysteries, history, and forgotten lore of ancient Egypt, slowly and calmly, so you can relax, unwind, and drift off while learning about one of the most fascinating civilizations in human history. From the pyramids and hidden chambers beneath the sands, to the gods, pharaohs, and ancient stories carved into temple walls along the Nile. If you enjoy relaxing history like this, consider subscribing and joining us for more journeys into the ancient world. Now, dim the lights, get comfortable, and let's return to the sands of Egypt. The position of the void is a clue. It is not tucked away like a simple storage room. It runs high and central, aligned along the main axis, echoing the long rising form of the Grand Gallery below. Its shape and isolation resemble not a cramped burial niche, but something closer to a sealed hall. A gallery, perhaps even a silent ritual passage, meant to be walked only in darkness and in trance. According to the stories, Egypt was once a school for souls, a place where the living rehearsed death. When we add this hidden void to the sealed doors in the Queen's chamber shafts, the strange metal fittings, and the resonant chambers that vibrate at precise tones, a pattern begins to emerge. The Great Pyramid starts to look less like a static tomb and more like a stone machine, tuned for changing human consciousness. But what really happened inside those hidden chambers? What kind of knowledge was being protected inside that invisible hall above the Grand Gallery? In the next section, we'll follow the clues left in texts, tunnels, and echoes of sound to see whether this tomb was actually an initiation school in disguise. What were they doing in there? So if this was not a simple grave, we have to ask a dangerous question. What were they doing in there? Who was allowed to cross those thresholds of stone? Who stepped into the Great Pyramid's dark heart while the desert slept outside? What kind of knowledge demanded hidden chambers, sealed shafts, and a void so secret that only cosmic rays could reveal it? And most importantly, why were these activities erased from the official story of pharaohs and funerals? Muon scans have shown a vast, unexplained space above the Grand Gallery, a hidden hall that no ancient text openly describes. Robotic cameras in the Queen's chamber shafts have found tiny stone doors with copper fittings, like handles on a locked cabinet in the sky. Imagine priests in white linen, standing before those sealed gates, chanting in the dark, as sound rolls up through granite passages that hum at precise frequencies. If this was just a burial monument, why does it behave like a tuned instrument, waiting for a human voice? For thousands of years, most visitors have looked at Egypt as a kingdom of rulers and their tombs. But old legends tell a different story. According to the stories, Egypt was a vast mystery school, a living university of the soul, where pharaohs, priests, and chosen initiates trained not only to govern the Nile, but to navigate the terrifying geography of the afterlife. The greatest secret was not how to rule the living, it was how to pass through the gates of death and come back with memory intact. Did you know some ancient writers claimed there were entire libraries of ritual texts, star manuals, and underworld maps reserved only for the initiated? Imagine the Great Pyramid as the graduate temple of that curriculum. Not a classroom with benches, but a labyrinth of stone where lessons were delivered through darkness, silence, and resonance. A place where an initiate lay in the granite box of the king's chamber while voices thundered around them, rehearsing the journey through the duat, gate by gate. In this series, The Mystery Schools of Egypt, we follow that possibility wherever it leads. This is an ongoing journey where archaeology meets myth, where muon tomography stands beside the Book of Coming Forth by Day, and where each episode peels back another layer of the stone labyrinth. But what really happened in those nights of ritual? Was this pyramid a tomb, a machine, a star gateway, or a training ground for the soul? We'll find out together, from the outer casing stones to the innermost passages, from modern scanners to the oldest funerary texts. We will walk step by step through the evidence. Your role here is not to be a passive spectator. You are an initiate in training, weighing every chamber, every legend, every echo, and deciding for yourself what the builders discovered inside and why they wanted only a few to follow. From stone tomb to living school. So before we rush into the hidden voids and secret doors, we need to step back and look at the story we were all taught. In the conventional timeline, the Great Pyramid rises in the Old Kingdom about 4,500 years ago under Pharaoh Khufu. It is presented as a monumental tomb, a kind of stone fortress built to protect a royal body and its grave goods for eternity. In this view, everything is clean, clear, and finished. A descending passage cuts down into the bedrock to a rough subterranean chamber. Above it, an ascending passage leads upward, branching into the so-called Queen's Chamber and continuing into the long, steep Grand Gallery. At the top, the Grand Gallery delivers us into the King's Chamber, with its red granite walls and a single rectangular granite box that textbooks call a sarcophagus. Did you know that for thousands of years in our written diagrams, this interior has looked almost too perfect? Neat lines, labeled chambers, a closed system with no real surprises. The message is subtle but powerful. This is a finished design, a one-purpose machine for burial, nothing more. Greek visitors, like Herodotus, spoke of Egypt as a land where gods once walked among humans. Later, Hermetic traditions would claim the temples were not just shrines, but schools of the soul, where priests learned to die before they died. According to the stories, the great stone monuments were not merely graves, they were initiation halls where pharaohs and priests rehearsed the afterlife. So what happens if we shift the metaphor? Instead of a stone tomb, imagine a living school. Imagine that what we call chambers were classrooms, each one designed to test a different layer of the self. The narrow ascending passage becomes a first trial, forcing the body into a slow, bowed climb. The grand gallery stretches above like a stone canyon, a processional path where torches, chants and rituals might have prepared initiates for the next gate. Then there is the king's chamber, empty walls, no carved funerary scenes, a granite box with no lid and no mummy. Yet this chamber sings. Specific tones cause the stone to vibrate, turning the room into a resonant instrument. What kind of knowledge would design a tomb that behaves like an acoustic device for altered states of consciousness? Most importantly, what if the blueprint was never about storing a corpse at all? Imagine the pyramid as a three-dimensional map of the Duat, the Egyptian realm of the dead. Each passage is a corridor of the underworld, each chamber a gate. Walking from darkness below to the elevated heart of stone above becomes a living rehearsal of the soul's journey. If that is even partly true, then the Great Pyramid stops being a silent grave and becomes a machine for guiding consciousness. And the real mystery becomes, what did they hide in its depths to power such a school of the afterlife? We'll find out together when we step beyond the textbook diagram and into what was actually discovered inside. Who was allowed past the first gate? To reach those hidden spaces, not everyone could simply walk in. For thousands of years, the inner chambers of Egypt's great monuments were treated like living beings with their own boundaries, their own gates. The outer courts were for processions and public rituals, but past a certain point, the stone itself became a filter. In most temples, ordinary people stopped at open courtyards, offering incense, food, and prayers beneath the sun. Behind them, doorways narrowed, ceilings dropped, and light dimmed. Only priests, certain officials, and the pharaohs themselves moved deeper, passing through halls where the air grew thick with resins and whispered hymns. At the very heart, in the smallest, darkest rooms, only a handful of carefully chosen initiates were allowed to enter. The same pattern appears in the pyramids, broad bases for the world to see, but a hidden interior world for almost no one. Did you know that while most Egyptians learned practical trades, the rumoured mystery schools guarded a different curriculum entirely? Children of farmers, craftsmen, and scribes were trained to plough, to measure fields, to recite basic prayers to Ra and Osiris. They learned how to live well, obey Ma'at, and honour the dead. But old legends tell a different story about those selected for deeper training. According to the stories, they studied dreams as messages, symbols as maps, and practiced what some texts call dying before death. In these secret schools, initiates were taught to leave the body in controlled journeys, to navigate inner landscapes that mirrored the duat. They memorized long sequences of names and gates, not just to survive judgment after death, but to move consciously through layers of reality while still alive. This was not about comfort, it was about transformation. The ultimate goal was not merely a pleasant afterlife in green fields. In the language of the texts, the aim was to become an Ak, a transfigured being of light. An Ak could pass through the duat's 12 gates, stand before the weighing of the heart, and then move freely between worlds. To be Ak was to shine, to speak words that had power in both realms, to return with knowledge that could guide a kingdom. Most importantly, it meant no longer being trapped by death at all. Now imagine yourself at the threshold of that training. It is night. The desert wind has fallen silent. A priest gestures for you to follow as a torch flares to life, painting the stone with gold and shadow. You leave behind the campfires, the laughter, the arguments over grain and taxes. With each step into the passage, the noises of the world fade until there is only the scrape of sandals, the crackle of flame, and your own heartbeat. Cool air presses against your skin. The torchlight reaches only a few paces ahead, swallowing the distance into black. Somewhere above, unseen shafts point towards stars you can no longer see. The priest does not speak. This is your first gate, a crossing from open sky into a carefully constructed interior cosmos. Here, the architecture itself becomes part of the initiation. Tight shafts climb at impossible angles. False passages end in blank stone. Hidden doors blend into the masonry. In certain chambers, a single word can echo so strangely that it seems to come from behind you or beneath your feet. Some researchers have shown that the king's chamber can resonate at specific frequencies, making the granite vibrate as if the room is humming with you. Imagine encountering that without preparation. Would you think you were hearing your own soul? These tricks of space, sound, and darkness were not accidents. They protected the body of the king, yes, but they also protected the teachings from minds not yet ready. The untrained could be disoriented, frightened, even broken by the sensory assault. Only those who had mastered their fear in outer rituals were led deeper. But what really happened once the doors closed behind them? What kind of knowledge waited in those inner rooms guarded by stone and silence? And how do the modern discoveries, hidden voids, sealed shafts, and unexplained fittings change what we thought we knew about who was truly allowed past the first gate? Voices from the deep past. The first witnesses, to answer that, we have to listen to the first people who tried to peek behind those doors. Long before modern scanners, a curious traveler walked along the Nile, asking the priests questions that many of us still ask today. His name was Herodotus, 5th century BCE. By his time, the Great Pyramid was already more ancient to him than the Roman Empire is to us. For thousands of years, the stones had been standing. The original builders were legends, but the mystery was still alive. Herodotus tells us that the Egyptians spoke of underground chambers, of passages cut deep below the pyramid plateau, even of an island tomb surrounded by a man-made lake. He heard about hidden routes beneath temples and about secret teachings that the priests refused to show him. According to the stories, certain halls were only for those who had passed inner trials. Outsiders could ask questions. Initiates walked the corridors. Did you know this pattern repeats again and again in ancient sources? Greek and later Roman writers arrived in Egypt and found not a fresh, young civilization, but a world already old and guarded. When Plato, Diodorus, Plutarch, and others wrote about the temples, they were describing monuments that had already seen 2,000 years of rituals, repairs, and forgetting. Yet the language they used was still the language of initiation, of grades, of inner and outer schools. They described temple libraries where books of wisdom were kept under the care of specialized priests. Clement of Alexandria famously speaks of 42 sacred books attributed to the god Thoth, whom the Greeks identified with Hermes Trismegistus. These were not random scrolls. They formed a curriculum: hymns and cosmology, astronomy and geometry, medicine and the body, and, most importantly, the rituals of the afterlife. Old legends tell a different story than simple tombs and tourist shrines. They speak of scrolls that mapped the journey through the duat, of liturgies that reenacted the sun's nightly passage through 12 gates of darkness. In some accounts, initiates stood in pitch-black chambers while priests chanted the names of underworld guardians, training the mind not to panic as the soul crossed each terrifying threshold. If temple complexes functioned as these vast, layered schools, is it really so strange to imagine that the greatest stone structure of all was not just a monument, but the capstone of this entire system, a final examination in stone? The Great Pyramid, with its hidden voids, angled shafts, and resonance-tuned chambers, suddenly begins to look less like a royal coffin and more like the graduate temple of a civilization obsessed with death mastery. What modern researchers call esoteric may simply be the broken remains of a once formal syllabus, a technical manual for transforming consciousness, scattered across papyri, carved on walls, and whispered in the writings of visitors who were only shown the outer rooms. But what really happened when a candidate reached the innermost space? We'll find out together when we follow the trail from these ancient voices back into the stone itself. The pyramid as a stone library of the soul. To answer that, we have to look at something that, at first, doesn't look mysterious at all. Words carved in stone. Did you know that the famous pyramid texts and the later Book of the Dead were never meant to be comforting bedtime prayers? They were manuals, technical documents. For the soul, the Egyptians imagined the afterlife as a dangerous journey through the duat, filled with rivers of fire, serpent guardians, and 12 great gates. To pass each gate, the soul had to speak precise spells, names, and passwords. Miss a word? Forget a title? Fail to recognize a guardian, and the journey could end in annihilation. So the priests created step-by-step guides, recitations for crossing lakes of flame, formulas for reassembling the body, scripts for standing before Osiris when the heart was weighed against Ma'at's feather. For thousands of years, these guides were copied and expanded, but the earliest version we know does not appear on papyrus at all. It appears carved inside pyramids, deep in the chambers of kings at Saqqara. Every wall is covered in vertical columns of signs. The pyramid texts, spells for climbing the sky, for transforming into a falcon, for slipping through the hidden doors of the duat. The tomb itself became a stone workbook for the afterlife. That detail is crucial. It means monumental architecture and written instructions were never separate. The pyramid was the container, and the text was the code. Old legends tell a different story than the idea of a simple tomb. They hint at buildings designed as three-dimensional textbooks for the soul. But then we hit a pattern interrupt. The Great Pyramid, the most precise and imposing of them all, is almost completely silent inside. No long funerary inscriptions on its main chamber walls. No carved spells in the grand gallery. So what kind of knowledge did it hold? What if the teachings are still there, but written in another language entirely? Not in hieroglyphs, but in geometry, in the exact proportions of the passages, in the sequence of chambers from subterranean pit to queen's chamber to king's chamber, in the way sound rolls and booms inside that granite box until the whole room vibrates. Most importantly, what if the initiate read the pyramid by moving through it step by step, like a living hieroglyph? Imagine the Great Pyramid as a stone codex. Each corridor is a sentence, each intersection a comma, each chamber is a chapter in the journey from darkness to light. The tight ascending passage presses on the body like a line of difficult text. The vast grand gallery opens suddenly like a revelation. In the king's chamber, a single word becomes a resonance, a hidden footnote written in vibration, audible only to those who knew how to listen. According to the stories, priests once used these chambers as schools of the afterlife, chanting in the dark until the stone itself answered back. Then the rituals stopped. The library went silent. But the story doesn't end there. Only in the last few decades have our tools become sensitive enough to begin reading this silent book again. Muon detectors reveal hidden voids above the grand gallery, like missing chapters. Fiber optic cameras snake through the queen's chamber shafts to peer beyond tiny stone doors with metal fittings, as if prying open sealed pages. Acoustic sensors map the frequencies that ignite the king's chamber into resonance. So what did they discover inside the pyramid that changed everything? The answer may be that we are not just excavating a monument. We are learning, line by line, to read a stone library of the soul. And the next page is still waiting in the dark. Cosmic rays and hidden halls, the big void. To turn that next page, scientists did something no ancient priest could have imagined. They aimed the cosmos itself at the Great Pyramid. Did you know that every second, Earth is showered by invisible particles from deep space? Cosmic rays slam into our atmosphere and create a rain of fragments, including tiny ghost-like particles called muons. These muons pass through mountains, cities, even pyramids. Most fly straight through, but stone slows them down. Detectors can count how many arrive from different directions and, over time, build a picture of what is dense and what is empty, like a slow-motion X-ray drawn in starlight. Around 2015, an international team launched the Scan Pyramids project. French researchers from HIP Institute and Université Paris-Saclay joined forces with Nagoya University in Japan and a team from Cairo. They placed muon detectors inside the Queen's chamber, in corridors, and even outside the pyramid, patiently recording every cosmic whisper that passed through the blocks. At first, The data showed what everyone expected: the massive bulk of stone, the known chambers, the steep grand gallery. But then, something appeared that no blueprint predicted. Above the grand gallery, high in the core of the pyramid, the muons traced the outline of a large, hidden void, a space at least as long as the grand gallery itself, perhaps larger, a hall in the sky of stone, with no known passage leading to it. Most importantly, this big void is not one of the familiar rooms. It is not the king's chamber, not the queen's chamber, not the small relieving spaces already mapped above the king's chamber ceiling. Its angle and position do not match the expected pattern of simple weight relief cavities. Structural engineers have tried to explain it away, but so far, no standard model fully fits the measurements. So what is it? Why would the builders hide a hall that no one could reach? Old legends tell a different story about these monuments. They speak of temples as mystery schools, where pharaohs and priests trained for the afterlife. If the grand gallery below was an initiation corridor lined with resonant stone and symbolic gates, what kind of knowledge was reserved for a second secret gallery directly above it? Imagine a chamber sealed from the beginning, reachable only by those who knew passages, now lost. No burial goods, no sarcophagus, only rituals in the dark, voices rising in vibration until the stone itself answered. Could the big void have been a final exam in that hidden curriculum, a place where only the highest initiates rehearsed the last stages of the soul's journey through the duat? This is where the discovery becomes uncomfortable. A particle physics experiment has forced Egyptology to confront a room that should not exist, in a place a simple tomb does not need. But what really happened inside such a hall? If it was ever opened, and if one secret gallery is still hanging in the air above us, how many more hidden chambers of training might be waiting in the stone, just beyond the reach of our current gates of knowledge? We'll find out together as we follow the trail from cosmic rays to the oldest manuals of the soul. The sealed shafts and the door with copper handles. Those hidden galleries in the stone are strange enough, but deep inside the Great Pyramid, there is something even more unsettling. A tiny shaft, a sealed door, and two metal handles waiting in the dark. In the early 1990s, a German engineer named Rudolf Gantenbrink sent a small robot into the so-called ventilation shafts of the Queen's chamber. On paper, these channels were just air ducts, but what really happened when the camera went inside changed that idea forever. The robot crawled into a space no human could enter, a tight limestone tunnel, barely wider than its own body, climbing at a precise angle toward the heart of the pyramid. Imagine watching that feed with the engineers. The wheels hum softly. The light flickers over smooth, carefully finished stone, not rough hacked rock for air to pass through, but polished surfaces, sharp corners, and a slope aligned with almost mathematical precision. Did you know that, if this were only about ventilation, a straight rough cut would have been enough? Instead, we see the signature of intention, minute after minute. The robot inches forward. The shaft bends slightly. Dust swirls in the beam. Then, suddenly, the tunnel ends. Not in open space, in a tiny limestone door blocking the way. Set into that door are two mysterious copper fittings, like handles or latches, sunk deep into the stone. No inscriptions, No convenient explanation, just a sealed gate, hidden at the end of a passage no ordinary visitor would ever see. Later missions returned, armed with more advanced robots and a new plan. A tiny drill bit pressed against the stone between those copper pieces and slowly bored a hole through the door. Behind it, the camera revealed a small, silent cavity. No treasure, no body, just another barrier beyond, another sealed block closing off the shaft, a nested sequence of thresholds, like the gates of the Duat, only this time in limestone and metal instead of myth. So what are these shafts really for? They rise from the Queen's chamber and point, not randomly, but towards specific stars, Sirius, associated with Isis, and the belt of Orion, linked to Osiris and the resurrected pharaohs. For thousands of years, these stars marked the cycle of death and rebirth in the sky. Old legends tell a different story than mere ventilation. According to the stories, the soul of the king became an Ak, a shining one, joining these gods among the constellations. In that light, these channels begin to look less like air ducts and more like spiritual conduits, ritual pathways for the car or bar to journey outward. What kind of knowledge does it take to marry stone, angle, and star positions so precisely that a hidden shaft becomes a celestial pointer? Most importantly, if there is nothing vital beyond those doors, why seal them so carefully, decorate them with metal, and hide them where no torch could ever reach? These are not the choices of lazy builders. They are the choices of priests and architects designing a school in stone. But if these are gates, who or what were they meant to guide? And what lies beyond the final barrier we still have not opened? When stone begins to sin. To reach the answer to that question, we have to step into the most famous room in the pyramid, a place where stone itself begins to sing. The king's chamber is not large, but it feels heavy, like standing inside a tuned instrument. It is a simple rectangle lined with massive blocks of red Aswan granite, each one hauled from hundreds of kilometers away. The ceiling is flat, made of huge granite beams. At the far end sits a single granite box, often called a sarcophagus, resting empty on the floor. No gold, no inscriptions, just geometry, stone, and silence. But that silence does not behave like silence. Researchers who enter this chamber and speak, chant, or tone even a single note report something strange. Certain pitches do not fade, they bloom. A low sound can swell into a powerful standing wave, bouncing between the walls, folding back on itself until the entire room vibrates. Did you know some experiments have measured specific resonant frequencies here, around 110 Hz, and related harmonics that seem to be amplified by the chamber's exact dimensions? Visitors describe pressure in the ears, tingling in the skin, and a feeling that the sound is inside the bones, rather than just in the air. Modern teams have used speakers and tone generators instead of voices and watched the granite box itself begin to hum, as if answering. Microphones pick up complex patterns of resonance, not random echoes. This is not just a room. It behaves like a precisely tuned cavity. Why? One clue lies in the granite. It is rich in quartz and other minerals capable of piezoelectric effects, meaning they can convert mechanical stress into electrical charge and back again. In other words, when sound waves strike these blocks, the stone may be doing more than vibrating. It may be interacting with energy in a way closer to a crystal instrument than a simple wall. For thousands of years, this chamber has been waiting in the dark, ready to respond the moment a human voice breaks the stillness. Now connect that to something the Egyptians cared about deeply: sacred sound. Their priests spoke of Heka, the power of magical speech. Names, when pronounced correctly, were not labels, but keys. Old legends tell a different story than simple tomb building. They describe rituals where correctly intoned words opened hidden gates in the duat. According to the stories, speech could move a soul. So imagine an initiate lying inside that granite box, the lid perhaps once in place, priests chanting around them. The chamber begins to resonate. The stone vibrates against skin and bone. The boundary between inner sound and outer sound blurs. Heartbeat, breath and chant lock into a shared rhythm. What kind of knowledge do you gain when your entire body becomes an instrument? Some researchers now suggest that the box was never meant mainly for a corpse, but for a living body undergoing a controlled ritual of symbolic death and rebirth. In that reading, the king's chamber is a classroom for consciousness, not a burial room. Most importantly, the stone itself would be part of the teaching, tuning the initiate's awareness, loosening it from ordinary senses, and rehearsing the journey beyond the final gate. But if this is a school, where did its graduates go? And what traces of their training did they leave behind in the texts and temples outside? Why bury a school in stone? If the king's chamber is a classroom, it raises a disturbing question. Why build a school that almost no one could enter? If this was teaching, why bury the lesson inside millions of tons of stone? Most of us grew up believing the Great Pyramid was just a royal tomb. But old legends tell a different story. They speak of hidden schools, secret rituals, and pharaohs learning to walk among the stars. Did you know that when modern scientists fired cosmic rays through the pyramid, they found a vast hidden void above the Grand Gallery, an entire space no ancient text openly mentions? What kind of knowledge demands that level of silence? Look at the pattern. Narrow star shafts that only align with certain constellations, sealed doors in the Queen's chamber, locked with tiny copper fittings, a granite box in the King's chamber that hums when a voice hits the right frequency. This is not casual architecture. This feels like a labyrinth of filters, gates, and passwords. The deeper question is, passwords to what? According to the stories, the Egyptians believed the afterlife was not a vague cloud, but a structured realm with its own laws. The duat was mapped like a cosmic landscape, divided into regions, guarded by beings that tested the soul. In that worldview, knowing the route was power, knowing the names of the guardians, the words that open the gates, the rituals that stabilize the soul. This was a technology of consciousness. And dangerous technology is always hidden. Imagine if anyone could learn how to step out of the body at will, influence others from the unseen, or cling to existence without moral growth. Imagine pharaohs, priests, or ambitious courtiers trying to weaponize the journey through death, to return with influence, but without wisdom. In a world where the soul could be fragmented, trapped, or devoured, giving the unprepared full access to those maps would be like handing out nuclear codes. So they buried the school in stone. They wrapped the curriculum in acoustics, darkness, and ordeal. Only those who had been ethically prepared, tested in character, discipline, and devotion to Ma'at, were led through the hidden chambers. Only they heard the chants that made the walls vibrate. Only they lay in the granite box while the temple above sang around them. But what really happened in there? What did they see when their senses were stripped away? What did they hear in the resonance that no outsider ever recorded? Most importantly, what did they become on the other side of that training, that the culture felt compelled to guard it behind voids, shafts, and stone doors no one could open for thousands of years? To understand that secrecy, we have to enter their cosmos, a universe where death is a gate, not a wall, where every soul must travel through the duat, past rivers of fire, fields of reeds, and halls of judgment. In the next section, we'll walk that map together and see how this dangerous, precise knowledge of the afterlife became the hidden syllabus of Egypt's mystery schools. The Duat, Egypt's invisible labyrinth. To understand that secrecy, we have to enter their map of death, not a blank darkness. A designed landscape, a hidden labyrinth the Egyptians called the Duat. For them, death was not a fall into nothing. It was a journey. Did you know they spoke of it the way we speak about traveling through a country, with regions, borders, and dangerous crossings? The Duat had rivers and deserts, caverns and islands, lakes of fire and cool pools of regeneration. To an ancient Egyptian, this realm was as real and structured as the Nile Valley itself. Imagine a twilight world stretching beneath the horizon. Overhead, stars burn in deep indigo. Below, a black river winds past sandbanks, where half-seen beings watch in silence. Through this darkness sails the bark of Ra, the sun god, who does not simply vanish at sunset, but travels underground. According to the stories, his golden boat glides through caverns painted with stars, past roaring waterfalls of fire, through tunnels where the walls themselves are covered in serpents. Each region is marked by gates, actual gates, with lintels, thresholds, and guardians posted like cosmic border guards. This is where the Duat becomes a true invisible labyrinth. Old legends tell a different story than a vague afterlife. They speak of 12 hours, 12 sections of the night, each ruled by a different company of gods and spirits. At every gate, a name must be spoken. A spell must be recited. The wrong word or silence meant the soul was stopped. The texts describe lakes of burning water, fields filled with knives instead of grain, and star-filled tunnels where serpents coil around entire corridors. In one region, giant serpents spit fire at the bark of Ra. In another, dismembered enemies of the gods are bound upside down in caverns. Between these horrors, there are also secret chambers of healing, where the blessed dead drink cool water and are given new breath. At the center of this underworld order stands Osiris, once a living king, now lord of the Duat and judge of the dead. Every soul, from peasant to pharaoh, was believed to stand before his throne in the Hall of Two Truths. Here, Anubis, jackal-headed guide of souls and master of embalming rituals, leads the dead forward, placing the heart on the scales. Thoth, the ibis-headed scribe, records the result as the heart is weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the principle of truth and cosmic balance. Most importantly, this was not metaphor to them. Tomb walls show the 12 hours as diagrams, Papyri unfold like secret road maps with tiny boats, coiled snakes, and labeled gates. The Book of Coming Forth by Day and the Amduat lay out who guards each portal, which demon must be named, which symbol must be recognized. Precision mattered. Saying the exact name of a serpent could freeze it in place. Mispronouncing a gatekeeper's title could trap the soul in a side passage forever. For thousands of years, priests copied these maps with obsessive care. But what really happened when these same maps were carved onto chamber walls deep inside pyramids and temples? Were they just guides for the dead or training manuals for the living? In the next section, we'll find out together how pharaohs and initiates used these terrifying charts of the Duat as the core curriculum of Egypt's most secret schools of the afterlife. Rules of the underworld game. If the Duat was just a dreamlike haze, none of this would matter. But the Egyptians described it as a place with rules, precise rules. Almost like a game with strict levels, penalties, and a final boss you absolutely could not afford to lose to. Did you know the soul itself had to stay assembled to even play? According to the stories, the Ba, the mobile winged aspect of the person, and the Ka, the life force double, had to remain united and anchored. If they drifted apart, the person's identity dissolved. No replays, no second attempt. So the texts warn again and again: protect your name, guard your memory, keep your parts together. This is why names and recognition were everything. In the Duat, beings, gates, and regions were not vague symbols. They were addressed like security checkpoints. The soul had to recognize each entity and speak its secret name. Get it right, and the gate opened. Get it wrong, and the passage closed. Sometimes forever. Forgetfulness was not just inconvenient. It was a trap laid into the landscape of the afterlife itself. For thousands of years, priests copied sequences of these encounters. When you reach this gate, say this. When this guardian appears, call it by that name. Many of the so-called spells in the Book of the Dead read less like hymns and more like scripts. They are passwords, challenge responses, and carefully worded self-introductions. The soul rehearses lines such as, I know you, I know your name, I know the names of your guards, like someone memorizing access codes to move through hidden chambers. But all of these smaller tests led toward one terrifying scene, the Hall of Two Truths. Here, the heart of the deceased was placed on a scale and weighed against the feather of Ma'at, the principle of truth, harmony, and cosmic order. On one side, the beating record of a lifetime. On the other, a single, weightless feather. Thoth, the scribe god, stood by to record the result. At the edge of the scene crouched Ammit, part crocodile, lion, and hippopotamus, waiting to devour the heart of anyone who failed. This was not torture, it was annihilation. If the heart proved heavier than truth, the person did not go to a fiery hell, they simply ceased. Old legends tell a different story than endless punishment. The worst fate was to be erased from existence, to lose one's name, memory, and place in the great pattern. So, another layer of rituals focused on the heart itself. Some spells are explicit instructions, what to say so that the heart does not testify against its owner. Imagine standing in that vast hall, knowing that your own inner record could condemn you unless you had trained it, disciplined it, aligned it with Maat while still alive. Most importantly, this was not just about magic words. It was about having a heart light enough to pass the test. When we read these texts closely, something surprising appears. The duat is not presented as a vague mystical cloud. It is laid out like a technical manual for navigating a non-ordinary environment. There are maps, checkpoints, protocols, and failure conditions. Certain gates are timed. Certain ferrymen demand exact phrases. Certain regions are clearly off limits unless you carry the right authorization. In other words, the afterlife was treated as a system with rules that could be learned, practiced, and mastered. And if the journey after death was that structured and demanding, then training for it while alive was not optional. It was a curriculum. Suddenly, the idea of the pyramid changes. What if those narrow shafts, echoing chambers, and hidden voids were not just symbolic architecture, but a stone simulation of the duat's stages? What if pharaohs and initiates walked through darkness, reciting these passwords in real time, using the pyramid itself as a controlled underworld environment? But what really happened when a living person entered this game board of the afterlife and lay down in the granite box, as if already dead? In the next section, we'll find out together how the rules of the duat were turned into physical, sensory training inside the Great Pyramid itself. Dying before you die, training in the dark. The rules of the duat were turned into physical, sensory training inside the Great Pyramid itself. Here is the twist almost no textbook mentions. The most advanced initiates did not wait for their last breath to meet the underworld. Did you know there is a long secret tradition that pharaohs and chosen priests tried to cross those invisible gates while still alive? Not as a metaphor, as a controlled, ritual plunge into the dark. According to the stories, this privilege was not given lightly. Pharaohs, high priests, and a handful of carefully selected initiates spent years preparing inside these mystery schools. They were drilled in ethical purity, in strict diets, in silence. They memorized line after line of sacred words until the book of coming forth by day lived inside them. Dream incubation rites trained them to watch their own visions at night, to recognize symbols of the duat before ever entering a tomb. Then, when the priests judged them ready, the real journey began. Imagine being led through the pyramid at night. No torches, just a single flickering lamp that disappears as the passages narrow. The floor suddenly rises, the ceiling drops. Each change in elevation marks a new hour of the duat. Each bend in the corridor is a gate. Old legends tell a different story about these angles and constrictions. They were not architectural accidents, but physical triggers. The body learns what the soul will one day face. At last, the initiate reaches the king's chamber. The granite box waits, cool and empty. Around it, a small circle of priests in white linen. The lamp is extinguished. Total darkness swallows the chamber. The initiate lies down in the stone chest, like a corpse laid out for burial. Arms at the sides, breath shallow. Low, sustained chanting fills the granite room. Specific tones, chosen to match the chamber's strange resonance, make the walls hum. For thousands of years, that humming has been compared to a living presence. The vibrations pass through bone and blood. With sight taken away and ordinary sounds erased, The initiate's senses lose their usual anchors. Where are they now? In stone, in body, or already in the first corridor of the Duat? Here, memorization becomes a lifeline. The initiate cannot read a scroll in this darkness. The texts must rise automatically, like a second heartbeat. Passages for protection, names of guardians, the exact words to open hidden gates. Most importantly, the discipline to keep reciting when fear presses on the chest, like another slab of granite. But what really happened when the body reacted? Heart racing, mind drifting out beyond the stone box. Were these just visions, or early experiments in leaving the body behind? As we follow the initiate back through those rising corridors and tightening angles, we start to see the pyramid as a rehearsal maze. Every step is practiced until it becomes second nature, so that one day, when death comes, the soul will recognize the path. In the next section, we'll find out together how these dark rehearsals may have left physical traces, subtle alignments with stars and energies, that still whisper of a technology far beyond a simple tomb. Through 12 gates of stone, to the untrained eye, the Great Pyramid is just corridors and chambers in stone. But what if every turn, every angle, was a gate, a test, a rehearsal for the 12 hours of the Duat that the soul would one day cross for real? Did you know some Egyptologists already map the underworld's 12 hours onto the pyramid's inner layout? Imagine stepping into the descending passage as the first hour begins. The air cools, the light behind fades. This is the soul's plunge into the night, the first gate of descent. The encounter is simple but brutal. A long, steep tunnel that forces the body low and the breath slow. The correct response: surrendering speed, anchoring the mind, refusing panic. The reward is reaching the subterranean chamber without turning back. Down there, in that rough, unfinished room, the second and third gates wait. The Duat's chaos hour. No carved walls, no comforting images of gods, just rough stone, dead silence, and perhaps, in ritual times, complete darkness. The initiate meets the formless. Disorientation, fear, the sense of being buried alive. According to the stories, the response was not to flee, but to stand, recite, and name the darkness. One wrong word, one forgotten line, and in Egyptian thought, the soul could be bound. Precision was not decoration, it was survival. Then comes the turning, the secret pivot from down to up. The narrow ascending passage becomes the fourth gate, pressing the body again into a low posture. Here, the test is alignment. The spine, the breath, the whispered formulas, all had to match. In some reconstructions, a mispronounced name did not just mean failure in a ritual. It meant that, in the true afterlife, the guardian of that hour would not recognize the traveler at all. Emerging into the grand gallery, the initiates entered gates 5 through 9. This towering stepped space feels like a stone throat rising toward the stars. Imagine walking its length as priests chanted, the sound stacking and rolling overhead. Each segment could be a gate, a pause, a challenge, a question from the unseen, encounter, response, reward, over and over until the answers lived in the bones. For thousands of years, texts like the Amduat and the Book of Coming Forth by Day have preserved fragments of these passwords and names, but what really happened in the dark halls of these mystery schools? Most importantly, were those scrolls the full curriculum or just the public outline? Old legends tell a different story. They hint that the 12 gates were not only the spine of the underworld, but the spine of a hidden ritual path. The early gates trained basic courage and focus. The later ones, perhaps linked to the king's chamber and its resonant granite box, were reserved for those who had proven absolute steadiness. There, a single tone or word might have been enough to open an inner gate or close it forever. What kind of knowledge requires that level of exactness? We'll find out together when we follow the trail from these spoken passwords to the stone itself and to the strange alignments and hidden voids that suggest the pyramid was built as a living map of the soul's journey, echoes in other mystery traditions. If the Great Pyramid is a map of the soul's journey, then here's the unsettling part. It is not alone. All across the ancient world, echoes of the same pattern appear, as if different cultures were reading from one hidden script. Did you know the Greeks had their own mystery schools that promised victory over death? At Eleusis, near Athens, thousands of initiates walked in torchlit processions, then vanished into underground halls, the secret, nocturnal rites. What happened inside was guarded under penalty of death. Ancient authors only hint at it: a ritual of descent, a symbolic death, and a shocking vision that left people convinced the afterlife was real. Does that sound familiar? Most of us grew up hearing that these were just agricultural festivals about grain and seasons. But old legends tell a different story. They speak of initiates passing through darkness, hearing sacred words, witnessing a drama of a goddess descending to the underworld and rising again. The pattern is clear: go down, face the unknown, return reborn. In Egypt, the soul walked the duat. In Greece, it walked the shadowy halls of Hades, but with new guidance. Across the Near East and Mediterranean, the same themes rise from the stones. Caves carved into hillsides, labyrinths winding beneath palaces, underground chambers aligned with solstices or star risings. These were not random basements. They were stages for carefully designed journeys where priests led initiates through narrow passages, blind turns, and echoing vaults that felt like the inside of the earth itself. In those spaces, a human life could be rehearsed as a passage through death. According to the stories, the motifs repeat like a code, a guided descent, meetings with guardians or judges, the demand for names, titles, or passwords at sealed gates, and, most importantly, the promise of emerging twice born. The initiate did not just learn about the afterlife, they trained to move through it, to stand before cosmic judges without fear, to change their destiny by changing their relationship to death. So where does Egypt fit into this web of mysteries? For thousands of years, travelers called it the land of hidden wisdom, the mother of temples and schools. Many later traditions, from Greek philosophers to Hermetic writers, point back to the Nile as their source. If caves and catacombs were the classrooms of other cultures, Egypt may have taken the same idea and pushed it to its architectural limit. Imagine the Great Pyramid as the pinnacle of this initiatory design, not just a tomb, but the most ambitious ritual instrument ever built. Its angled shafts mirror the ascent of a soul to the stars. Its cramped passages enforce a physical descent into darkness. Its resonance chambers turn a single tone into a living presence around the body. If other peoples built symbolic underworlds, then an Egyptian pyramid functioning as a mystery school device is not wild speculation. It is the logical extreme of a global pattern. But if so many cultures shared this hidden curriculum, we are left with a deeper question. Were they all guessing in the dark? Or were they preserving fragments of a much older, shared technology of the soul? To answer that, we have to look even closer at the stone itself and at what modern science is now finding inside the pyramid that no ancient text ever mentioned. Reading the pyramid anew. So let's point our gaze back into the stone. When modern scientists fired cosmic rays through the Great Pyramid, they did not just confirm what was already on the blueprint. They saw a secret the architects never wrote down, a vast, hidden void floating above the grand gallery like a silent, invisible hall. If this was only a tomb, that void looks like a mistake. But what really happened if we read it as part of a mystery school? Imagine it not as wasted space, but as an upper initiation hall, a final classroom suspended between earth and sky, a place where only those who had passed every lower test were brought, blindfolded, in darkness, to rehearse the last gate of the afterlife. Now bring the other anomalies back into view. The sealed shafts of the Queen's chamber, ending in tiny stone doors with metal fittings. The star alignments, the strange copper elements that should not be in a simple air vent. Did you know that according to the stories, the soul had to find its way through starry regions of the Duat, guided by precise names of constellations and gates? Seen through that lens, those shafts stop being ventilation and start looking like spirit corridors, tuned to specific stars, used in rituals where priests called the Ba and Ka along a mapped celestial path. Then there is the King's Chamber, a granite room that hums. Acoustic tests show that when certain tones are sung or played, the entire chamber vibrates, and the granite box at its heart responds like a struck bell. Most of us grew up hearing that this was only a sarcophagus, but old legends tell a different story. What if this was a resonance engine for consciousness, designed to shake the body, the breath, and the brain into altered states? Not a coffin, but a calibrated instrument. Now put all of it together as one integrated system, a resonant core chamber to launch the initiate out of ordinary awareness, star-tuned shafts to guide the imagined journey through the Duat, a hidden void above, perhaps the highest hall of testing, where the initiate practice standing before invisible judges, heart weighed against Mart's feather. This reading is bold, it is speculative, but it is not random. It rests on muon scans that prove the void is real, robotic footage that shows the sealed doors and metal fittings, acoustic measurements that document the resonance, and most importantly, on thousands of years of Egyptian obsession with the afterlife, ritual precision, and the gates of the underworld. So what kind of knowledge does this offer to us? Not a manual for copying ancient rituals line by line, but a challenge to treat life itself as preparation, to confront mortality consciously instead of pushing it away, to approach inner transformation with the same seriousness these priests and pharaohs gave to the journey beyond death. Pattern interrupt. This is not only about Egypt, it is about how we live now. In the next chapters of this series, we'll find out together whether this pyramid curriculum was unique or part of a much larger network of schools. We will walk into other temples, lesser-known pyramids, and underground chambers at Saqqara and beyond, each one another classroom in stone, each one holding a different lesson in the old Egyptian art of becoming more than human. Standing at the threshold, each of those classrooms in stone leads us back to the same place, this one pyramid, and what was discovered inside it. Did you know that this whole journey began not with a priest or a pharaoh, but with cosmic rays? When scientists bathed the Great Pyramid in muons, a hidden void appeared above the Grand Gallery, a chamber no ancient text had warned us about, and no modern blueprint could explain. From that moment, the story changed. We followed forgotten shafts from the Queen's chamber, watched tiny robots crawl towards sealed stone doors with metal fittings, and listened as the King's chamber itself answered with a low, vibrating tone when sound was released inside it. These were not random architectural quirks. Together, the voids, the doors, the resonance, the star-aligned shafts began to look less like the corridors of a tomb and more like the syllabus of a school. For thousands of years, most of us have been told that the Great Pyramid was simply the grandest grave ever built. But old legends tell a different story. According to the stories, Egypt was a place where pharaohs and priests trained for the afterlife, walking the gates of the Duat while still alive. When we look again at these hidden chambers, at the precise alignments to Orion and Sirius, at a granite box that behaves like an instrument instead of a coffin, the old legends start to feel less like fantasy and more like a manual. The key inversion is hard to ignore. What they discovered inside the pyramid did not just redraw the map of its corridors, it challenged our idea of what the building is for. If this is a stone diagram of the soul's journey, then each shaft is a path, each chamber a test, each resonance a ritual. What kind of knowledge were they encoding in stone? And most importantly, why hide it in a machine that only reveals its secrets when hit with cosmic rays and modern sensors? There is awe in realizing that the ancient builders may have engineered a full-scale underworld simulator, a place to rehearse death with more care than many of us give to living. There is also something unsettling. They built entire schools around the art of crossing the Duat. We build almost none around the art of meeting our own consciousness. So now, the questions turn back toward us. If life is a training ground for a larger journey, how would we live differently? What would a personal pyramid of practices look like? What inner chambers? What daily rituals? What hidden gates would we build into our own lives? As the camera pulls away from the granite box, gliding back through the Grand Gallery, past the hidden void, and out through the pyramid's apex, into the night, the stones fall silent. Above, the same stars that the shafts once targeted still burn. The real mystery is no longer only what lies inside the stone, but what lies inside us when we dare to enter. If these questions speak to something in you, stay with this journey. Share this mystery with someone who still thinks the pyramids are just tombs. And we'll find out together what other schools are still waiting in the sand, and what they can teach us about the long road through the gates of the afterlife, and back into the way we live now.